neurologist and academician, currently serving as the in charge of the Center of Excellence for Epilepsy, a collaborative initiative of the Ministry of Health, Department of Biotechnology, and AIMS. A DM in neurology from the prestigious NIMHANS, Dr. Tripathi has pursued multiple fellowships, including at NIH UCLA. With over 24 years at AIMS, she has mentored numerous students while passionately advancing epilepsy care through community outreach, free treatment initiatives like Ekatvam, and rural epilepsy camps via iReach. Her prolific research includes over 445 publications in leading journals and over 17,000 citations. She pioneered the first Indian series on the autoimmune epilepsy and introduced innovative surgical techniques for epilepsy treatment. Professor Tripathi is the recipient of multiple national and international honors, including the American Association of Physicians of Indian Origin Sleep Researcher Award and the Outstanding Achievement Award in Epilepsy at the Asian and Oceania Epilepsy Congress. She is also a visiting professor at the institutions in Germany, Indonesia, Morocco, and has held key leadership roles in neurological societies. Please join me in welcoming a remarkable Professor Manjari Tripathi. She will be guiding us through a lecture focusing on yogic interventions for sleep problems. Please come, ma'am.
Thank you. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Gyan program and Madam for having me here. My main area is, of work is epilepsy, but my second hat is sleep, and particularly sleep and cognition. So today I'll be talking to you because, the topic is such that it is about non-pharmacological interventions. So this being the topic, you people have been introduced to insomnia, yes? So you broadly know that you could fall into any of the three categories. One is you could be sleep deprived, okay? Is sleep deprivation the same as insomnia? No. Sleep deprivation means you are not getting an adequate opportunity to sleep. That is sleep deprivation. Okay. So nowadays there are lots of causes of sleep deprivation. Am I correct? We have lots of causes for sleep deprivation. Yes, what are they? Mobiles, Instagram, X, whatever. So that's sleep deprivation, it's not insomnia. Then you have excessive daytime somnolence. That is, you're sitting in this class and you're dozing. So that is another phenomenon, and that has a lot of causes for it. But the majority or the bulk of the symptom is despite getting an adequate opportunity to sleep, okay? You're getting 8 hours to sleep. You're still not sleeping, and that is insomnia. So despite having an adequate opportunity to sleep, you're not getting sleep. And this can occur in two types. One is you have some stressful event which has just happened in your house, or you have an exam, and before the exam, you are obviously going to be sleep deprived, so that's not insomnia. But if there's a stressful event, if there's some situation, some fighting going on in the house or something, you are going to bed for 8 hours, but there's too many thoughts in your mind, and you don't sleep for few, maybe once a week, like that, So that, what is that? That is a acute or short-term insomnia. Acute or short-term. Whereas long-term is in a week. You're not sleeping for 3 nights or so, or more than that. And it's gone on for 3 months. Okay? So for the past 3 months, 3 or more nights per week, you are not sleeping despite getting an adequate opportunity to sleep. What is that? It's chronic insomnia. So acute insomnia is not so much of a botheration for us. Okay? But chronic insomnia is. And why is chronic insomnia a a botheration. Why is it important to manage chronic insomnia? Because of its impact. How does it impact us? What is the impact of insomnia? Okay, the person is not sleeping, let him not sleep. What is going to happen? At the max, he's not sleeping. So one is, it's going to affect your, first, let's start with the non-body. First is the mind, okay? It's going to lead to mood problems. It's going to lead to depression. It's going to lead to irritability. It's going to lead to slow reflexes. You won't be sharp. If somebody tells you to do something suddenly, you won't be able to jump up and do it. So it's going to lead to a general sluggishness of your cognition, as well as it's going to alter your mood and behavior. Okay? Then, of course, it has an impact on the body systems. For example, it will have an effect on the heart. And we know those who are chronically insomniac are more likely to have cardiac events. Okay? It will also impact your blood sugar levels. It will cause increased blood sugar levels and diabetes. It will also impact your body weight, and it will make you obese. So you'll gain weight and you'll become obese. And research has shown that chronic insomnia also increases malignancies. Okay? So it has a huge impact. Okay? So that is why we are talking about the management of insomnia. Now, insomnia doesn't happen to everybody. Some people can sleep like anything. For insomnia, it is said that you have to have the 3 Ps. What are the 3 Ps? Do you know the 3 Ps? Precipitating factor. Pardon? Yes. And predisposing factor. Okay, so all the underlying personality, underlying, behavior, which is there, which is our overall behavior or personality, is the predisposing set we have. Okay? Some people are very calm. There may be a storm outside. The house may be on fire and everybody may be fighting, but they'll sleep well. Some people cannot. Okay? And then there may be a sudden event which triggers off. And that may keep happening in small amounts, which perpetuates it. Is it clear? So that is why it doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to a majority of the population. Do you know what the statistics are in India? The statistics in India is about 30% of our population has insomnia. I think it's an underestimate. How many of you know of an insomniac in your own family? In your own family. I think every family has one insomniac. Okay? So if you have a household of 4 people, then one would have insomnia. Now, the treatment of insomnia in our country is go to the pharmacy and take alprazolam. Okay? Or go and they'll give it to you also. They'll give you very happily. Over-the-counter medications are so easily available. But are they good? If you get used to alprazolam 0.25 milligram today, tomorrow you want to take 1 milligram. And after 3 years, you want to take 2 milligrams. And you just want to go on increasing it, and then you get less and less effect and you get more and more addicted or used to it. So alprazolam is not to be used. Okay? The treatment of choice for insomnia is non-pharmacological. Okay? Non-pharmacological is a first-line therapy. The established non-pharmacological therapy is cognitive behavior therapy. Now, who does the cognitive behavior therapy? Psychologist. How many psychologists we have in Delhi doing CBT? Do you know? Very few. Okay? So, the number of the psychologists who can do CBT is very few. And do you know the cost of one CBT session? Do you know the cost of one CBT session? Okay? It's like going to a parlor. Okay? So it's 3,000 to 5,000 rupees for each CBT session. Okay, when you go to the parlor, the lady will tell you, this needs a little bit, can I do this? Then she'll say, this needs a little bit, can I do this? And she'll make you spend about 3,000 rupees before you know that you finish that kind of money. So here, CBT is also expensive. Okay, but people are trained for it and they deliver it. There are 2 kinds of CBT. One is face-to-face. Like you're sitting in front of me in the room, we make you relax and do CBT. So that's going to be more expensive. And then there is group CBT, where people can sit in a or lie down in a group and do the CBT. Or there can be distance CBT. During COVID, many of the psychologists started doing online cognitive behavior therapy. So here you really need trained psychologists, you need trained, personnel doing it, and they charge for it. So now it's not new, but in our Indian system, we have a technique of restful sleep, or it's not actually sleep, it's just a restful state, and that is known as yoga nidra. Okay, now, or it's also known, the Indian term is yoga nidra, but the actual term is meditative sleep. Okay, now this is a very old technique. It is coming from ancient times, like even BC, it's before Christ time, that this technique was devised by our sages. And it does not have any religious underpinnings to it. So there is no religious practice that we do in this. It's just a state of relaxation. And what is the beauty? You can do it yourself. You don't need to shell down money for a psychologist. So that is what we at AIMS thought. My PhD student, she said, Madam, why don't we compare Yoga Nidra with cognitive behavior therapy? So we did a randomized control study which was published, where we randomized in a blinded manner patients who received Yoga Nidra versus patients who received CBT. And we saw the outcomes. So as I told you, it's a very ancient technique. And you can see here that the method we follow is that of Satyananda. Okay. And this is just to show you that there are books and volumes written about Yoga Nidra. Before we go to Yoga Nidra, there is a lot of, evidence which is out there of how yoga helps stress, blood glucose, physical, mental health, and autonomic functions. Okay. But there was no study for insomnia. And that is why we started looking at the possibility of doing such a study. Now, I will talk about the study, but my main aim is to demonstrate how it is done. Believe me, once you get used to doing Yoga Nidra, you will be addicted to doing it. You will do it on your own. You will do it when you're exhausted, and you will get up refreshed. So it is such a technique that I am addicted to Yoga Nidra. I do Yoga Nidra whenever I have to, try to do it daily. And the ideal time to do Yoga Nidra is in the morning, empty stomach, not after a heavy meal, because then you'll just doze off. And you don't want to doze off. It's not dozing off. So you would like to do it early morning. Ideal time for me is when I'm trying to get out of bed. That's when I do it, so that when I get out of bed after 20 minutes of doing it, I'm fresh and ready to go. So let's go to the, evidence which is there. As you can see, there are a lot of evidences. And you've heard of sleep hygiene in this 5 days. Sleep hygiene, you must have heard. How many of you have a routine for sleep hygiene? Very good. One hand only. So sleep hygiene is just the awareness that sleep is an activity which also needs to be prepped up for. Okay, like when you go outside, you prep up. You will comb your hair well. You will, dress up. You will not look shabby. So the same way, when you're going to sleep also, you have to do some prep up. That is sleep hygiene. And so you will avoid tea, coffee after 2 in the afternoon. Okay, so that you're not getting caffeine into your system. You will try to dim the lights in the room where you are, where you're likely to sleep, so that the melatonin gets going. Okay. Then you will not start fighting with your sister or your brother, or having an argument with your father, just before bedtime. You will be cool and calm. You won't read anything frightening or watch a horror movie at that time. You will probably be relaxing with the very cool or nice book which you're reading, which makes you relax or makes you sleepy. There's a book which makes me sleepy. That's the book of biostatistics. The moment I hold the book at 8 in the night, if I'm not getting, or 9 in the night, if I'm not getting sleep, I just get my biostatistics. Let me see what is confidence interval. And within 15 minutes of trying to understand what is confidence interval, I will be feeling sleepy. So that's a Everybody has one such book. Okay, so try to get hold of that book. Then you can have sleep association objects. Okay, like some people have a teddy bear, some people have their mother's chunni, and some people, they are different. People hug their mother and the mother's sari and sleep sometimes. Then, of course, you should use the bed only for sleeping. You can't use the bed for working on your laptop, watching your Insta, and looking at your mobile, eating food. Some people hostel mein to chalta hi hai. Hostel mein you people eat food on the bed. Okay, that I know because even I've done that. Okay, so avoid doing non-sleep activity on the bed. Then of course don't keep a clock in front of you. These are non-pharmacological. These are very easy. Nothing is a medicine here. It's just behavior. So this is also non-pharmacological management of sleep hygiene. Don't keep a clock and keep staring at that clock right in front of your bed, Otherwise you'll say, oh, it's now 10:15, I have not slept. Oh, it's now 10:30, I have not slept. Now it's 10:45, I have not slept. And that will induce a sleep anxiety. Okay, you will be in a state of perpetual anxiety. Why you're not sleeping? If you lie down on the bed, what is the normal time you should sleep in? Suppose you've gone, it's 9:30, you've gone to the bed with the intention of sleeping. What's the normal sleep latency for me and you? 15 minutes? Okay, definitely not more than half an hour. So, if you're not sleeping and it's become half an hour, what will you do? You will get up? Okay, no. I mean, you do that, you look at your mobile, that is not going to induce sleep. But as a part of sleep hygiene, you should not look at your mobile at that time. You should get up and you should just sit down and maybe read the most boring book you have in your hand. Okay, and then go back to the bed when you feel sleepy. So don't keep lying on the bed non-sleepy. That will not produce sleep. That will only increase your rumination and sleep anxiety. So this comes under the sleep promoting non-drug strategy. Is it clear? Now sleep restriction. Sleep restriction, how many of you all are aware of it? Non-pharmacological. Sleep restriction means you will go to bed and you will get out of bed. The moment you're feeling sleepy, you will go to bed. The moment you get up, you will get out of bed. You don't just go on lying on the bed in the morning for 1 hour doing this, that and the other. So you use that time, you restrict the time in bed to only the time that you are sleeping. Stimulus control, of course, you all know about. Cognitive behavior therapy, we've talked about. And then we have the yoga, which is Yog Nidra. So, Yog Nidra is resting stillness, and the procedure is usually done for 35 plus minus 20 minutes. Normally, it's around 20 minutes to 25 minutes. We'll be doing it after the session. So, it's basically a state where you are having a lucid sleeping, and the EEG at that time, done by researchers in our institute, had said that you have an EEG, which is an alpha EEG, and there is an increase of intermixed delta during that state, but you're not in sleep. Okay, do you know this the EEG activity in sleep? What is the EEG activity in stage 1 sleep? So first thing that happens in stage 1 sleep is when your eyes are closed, you're not sleeping. What is the activity? Very good. So resting stage just before sleep is alpha. The first epoch of sleep is when the alpha drops off by more than 30 minutes. No, alpha drops out. So alpha is what range? You know the ranges? So it's very easy to remember the ranges. The clue is D tab. Okay, D is delta, T is theta, A is alpha, B is beta. D tab, the tab. D is 4 or less than 4. T is 4 to 8. Okay, 8 to 12 is alpha, 12 to 22 is beta. It's very easy to remember the frequencies. So the alpha drops off means the frequency becomes lower than 8. Okay, and it becomes low amplitude. Okay, more than about half of the epoch. The first epoch of sleep is that. So Yog Nidra doesn't get you to the stage 1 of sleep. It gets you into an alpha intermixed with delta. So this was the registration. It was a registered study, because nowadays you can't do any clinical trial. Whenever any one of you ventures into a clinical study, you have to register it with the National's Clinical Trials Register, which is a CTRI. How many of you all are aware of CTRI? Okay, good. So this is just to show you the comparison of cognitive behavior training versus Yog Nidra intervention. Okay. So the similarities between the two are only that both are non-pharmacological. But for Yog Nidra, you require a lot of self-motivation to do it. You should be motivated. If you're not interested, if you're not going to, want to do it, you will not do it. So self-motivation is an important component of Yog Nidra. For CBTI, I told you about the cost, and there are weekly and bi-weekly sessions. You have to go to the psychologist, and it's usually a multi-component, therapy. Whereas for Yog Nidra, the initial 5 sessions can be supervised physically or online, and the rest is left for the practitioner to do on their own. Now, there is a method of doing Yog Nidra. It is very similar to CBTI. In fact, I boldly say in most of the conference, cognitive behavior therapy was a copy of Yog Nidra, because Yog Nidra came right from before BCE. If you go into the history of Yog Nidra, it is before Christ. So the methods are, you have to prepare yourself, which we will do in the class. Then you have to take a samkalpa. Samkalpa is a thought. It can be any thought. Okay, suppose you are in a negative mode and that is causing insomnia. You can use the thought that I am a happy person. Okay, and my day will go well, and I will be able to do all my responsibilities in this happy state of mind. That can be simple sankalpa. Okay, or the more complicated one will be, I will study when I am awake and I will sleep when I am asleep. Okay, so you have to give one thought before starting it, so that you are kind of meditating on that. Then of course, just like CBTI, you have body part awareness and feeling and sensation. Sometimes some practitioners do the feeling and sensation before the body part awareness. Okay. And then visualization. You can visualize anything. When I do Yog Nidra, I visualize the things which make me happy. So what are they? Dolphins in the sea twirling around, sunflower, the sea, whatever, the green forest, whatever are the images which give you immense, or a puppy playing. Okay. So there may be some things when you close your eyes, when you think about them, you feel very relaxed and happy. Okay. Now, you're not to think of things which will make you tense. You have to visualize things which make you relaxed and happy. That's a part of the Yog Nidra. And then you have to end the practice slowly. So these are the 7 stages of how we do Yog Nidra, and the total duration should be around 30-35 minutes or 20-25 minutes. Is there any doubt about this? Okay. So this is where we learned. We went to the Munger school, and it's by the river, and you can see the procedure is done like this. It's basically like Shavasana. How many of you all have practiced Shavasana? Yes, Shavasana is relaxing, but this is a little more than Shavasana. It's not just the physical relaxation, but the mental relaxation which also comes into the picture. And these are the saints. Many of them are actually not Indian. In the study, we did a level 1 polysomnography. So all our patients before getting the Yog Nidra and CBTI went for level 1 polysomnography. This is our polysomnography lab, and this is where we sit and monitor. The patient is sleeping on that side. We shut the lights, we close the curtains. And we also have to have a baseline 2-week sleep diary. So any study you do must follow the modern methods. You just can't say I did Yog Nidra and the patients did very well. You have to have a 2-week sleep diary just to make sure that the patient is actually sleeping or not sleeping, or what kind of sleep is it. And we first looked at only one patient. We didn't do many patients. We just looked at one person and saw what was happening. That this is before the randomization or before the start of the study. Now, it's very crazy, but all of us who are here, who are doctors, we are very, very good at spoiling other people's sleep, especially sleep specialists. They completely ruin the sleep of their own staff. So the sleep technicians, their sleep is gone. Okay, the nurses who are in the sleep room, their sleep is gone. But that's part and parcel of evaluation of the patient. So this was our study, which was then published in the journal, and this was a randomized control study. And as you can see, this is a flow diagram of the study. So whenever you do a study, which many of you may do when you join your institutes or whatever. Always have a baseline assessment period so that you're getting a baseline as to in which you will do your sleep diary, you will do your sleep questionnaires, the insomnia severity index. You have to have a time point 0 for anything. Okay. So you do a baseline and you see all the, you can do a baseline polysomnography also because we haven't yet started the intervention. After that, you randomize to Yoga Nidra intervention and CBTI intervention. Now, there are two kinds of randomization. You can have a blinding or you cannot have a blinding. In this study, it was very difficult to blind. How do you blind? You can blind the assessor, but you cannot blind the patients because they will know what is going on. Okay? And if somebody starts talking to the patient, it will be known whether he was in CBTI or he was in Yoga Nidra. So, this was not a truly blinded study, but it was an assessor blinded. Assessor blinded means whatever data we got from the polysomnogram, which we did comparing the baseline to the after the intervention period, was coded. So the PSGs were coded. They didn't have the name of the patient. Okay, and then somebody else is reading those PSGs who doesn't know what's happening. So you have to do that to improve the quality of your study. If you do not code and you know, oh, this patient, she is the mother of that nurse. Okay, maybe she showed an improvement. There's a bias which comes. Okay, so always try to do that, and then we, gave them a 5-day session. Supervised sessions were 5. Okay, and then after that we allowed them to do it by themselves. So follow-up was done, and you can see here the ultimate number was analyzed: 20 in the enrollment group of intervention and 17 in the CBTI group. And you can see most of them were young, so 43, 41, Yog Nidra was 44, okay? And you can see that their parameters were comparable, okay? The baseline parameters, when you randomize, the purpose of randomization is to remove bias and also to have matched parameters, okay? Otherwise, if you don't randomize and the person is very, very, severe, you may say, okay, let me put him in CBTI group because at least that's an established mode of therapy. So you will get a skewed, you will not get the same parameters. So randomization takes care of the parameters and they get equally balanced out. So you can see here that we did comparison of various questionnaires. So not only the PSG scores, but also the questionnaires. So there were some depression scores, anxiety scores, the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, okay, insomnia severity index. All these were compared in both the groups. And of course, then you see the sleep diary. So one was the questionnaires followed by the sleep diary. And then you look at the other, compare the time in bed, the polysomnography objective thing, like how much is N1, how much is N2, how much is N3, how much is REM, and the total sleep onset latency, sleep efficiency. You've heard of the word sleep efficiency? What is sleep efficiency? Yeah, so the time spent in bed. So suppose I spent 10 hours in bed, but my first epoch of sleep by the PSG came 2 hours after I slept. So obviously, I'm not being very efficient because I'm out of 10 hours in bed, I'm probably just sleeping maybe 6 or 7 hours. Okay, so it's a time ratio. And then we compared the pre and post intervention scores and all of these. So basically, we found in our study that there was an improvement in N3 sleep. Now, what is the quality of N3 sleep? What is N3 sleep? Slow wave sleep. Is it important? Why? It is the deepest, stage of sleep, and it's responsible for encoding. Encoding what? What do we encode in sleep? Sleep is the best school. Okay? School meaning whatever you learned in the morning hours, if you have to retain it, if you get into N3 sleep, you are going to retain it. So it's a best therapy for learning before exams is to sleep well. Not that you don't study. Study in the evening and sleep in the night. Your memory will be retained. So N3 did improve as well as the sleep latency is improved. Okay. So that was the effect of Yog Nidra. Then we wanted to see what is exactly Yog Nidra doing. So we looked at the various frequencies, alpha, beta, delta, gamma, and other slow activities, and we found Yog Nidra was inducing local sleep. How many of you have heard the term local sleep? Okay, so you don't, as I told you, it is not a total sleep. You're not sleeping in Yog Nidra, you don't doze off. It only induces a local frontal slowing, okay, which is there, which helps you relax. So this is what we found, and this was again very published. We did various analysis, we did mapping. So it helps us establish the electrophysiology of Yog Nidra. Electrophysiology of Yog Nidra is not sleep. It is a local form of slowing which is happening. Okay, and this was published then subsequently. Now, apart from that, apart from your non-pharmacological intervention of Yog Nidra, you also have to have a lifestyle which is conducive to giving you sleep. If you eat 5 minutes before sleeping, will you sleep? No, because your stomach is not sleeping, your intestines are not sleeping, and you are trying to sleep. So, the physiology of eating before meals should be at least 2 to 3 hours. So that it has gone down the stomach, it has gone down the intestines, and they are also in a relaxed state. Otherwise, you'll sleep and you'll be burping, or you'll have an acid reflux. You know, some people, they sleep immediately, they lie down immediately after eating. So what will happen? There will be acid reflux. That will prevent you from sleeping. It will cause a sleep onset insomnia. And sometimes they will just go on burping and sleep. Okay? And their stomach will be making rumbling sounds of movement in sleep. So that's not true sleep, and you are going to have to improve not only your Yog Nidra but also your Ahara, Vihara, Achara, Vichara, Vyavhara. Okay? These are old terms. Okay? Vyavhara means behavior. If you're going to be a very hyper person and not try to change that, again your sleep is going to be impossible. So you have to learn to, and why are we doing all this? To improve our health. It's not going to improve if you say, okay, why should I change my behavior? I will be a hyper person. Okay, so that that person thinks I'm very dynamic. You can do the same activity in a very calm manner, so that your body is able to relax and sleep. So that's where Ahara is food. In the night, if you start eating all masala, oil, butter chicken, whatnot, you are not going to be able to digest. So the night meal should be very light, like a soup or a broccoli or whatever, so light food. It shouldn't be like heavy, spicy meals. So that's your ahara. Morning and lunch, you have a nice lunch, but dinner should be light. Okay? Vihara. Vihara is your where you stay. So where you stay also, if it's very noisy, there's a television playing there, big boss is fighting over there, you are not going to sleep. Okay, so that is also very important. Okay, so please keep in mind all these things. It's not just it's not just CBTI or Yog Nidra, but an overall environment which is very, very important. Now, Madam talked about myofascial exercises, but believe me, in yoga you have very good myofascial exercises, and this is what we tell our OSA patients who don't want CPAP. We of course tell them to have CPAP because the AHI is high, but you know the problem with CPAP in India is the cost. Many people are not able to afford a 60,000 or a 80,000. 80,000 is like £1,000. Okay, they're not able to afford it. Okay, so we tell them you have to lose weight. So the first thing we have to tell them non-pharmacological is, you just don't go and say, okay, take the CPAP, you have OSA. No, you have to tell them that there has to be a change in your, especially the obese ones, at least lose 5 to 10 kgs if you can by walking, by your diet, increase the proteins in diet, reduce the carbohydrates in diet, take low glycemic index foods. Okay, do you know what are low glycemic index foods? Yeah, so fiber. Okay, then which Indian food has the lowest glycemic index? Lowest rajma, but we kill it by having it with rice. So just take plain rajma. So besan has low glycemic index. So you have to make sure that you lose weight by low glycemic index food, no carbs or low carbs. You can replace carbs with quinoa. Okay, so quinoa is a South American Brazilian food It's a little expensive, but it's worth it because it's very high in protein. Our diet is very deficient in protein. So quinoa can be used instead of rice. You can use millet flour like your jowar flour or bajra flour. In winters bajra, in summer jowar. So you can replace these so that your weight is coming down, and also increase the fiber and low glycemic index food. Avoid sugar, avoid sweet syrupy things. um, you should definitely avoid. So your weight will come down and your obstructive sleep apnea will also reduce. And sleep on the side. No OSA patient should sleep like this. Okay, they should be sleeping to the side. So how do you ensure that in Indian settings? So you can make the bed towards the wall. Okay, whichever, right wall, left wall, whichever side the person prefers, and you tell him you turn your back to the wall and touch the wall and sleep. So he gets the comfort of the wall. Or you put a big, that Gidda, that big round pillow. Okay, or you put a ball in the, that's very very bad. It tortures the person actually. So you put it in the vest. You put a ball, stitch a ball at the back so that he cannot lie on the back. Okay. So those are non-pharmacological measures for OSA. But in yoga, we also have what is known as the Sheetkari Pranayam, otherwise known as the hissing breath. Okay. So you have to inhale through the teeth. Okay. So when you inhale through the teeth, you are strengthening your muscles around the oropharynx. Okay. And it takes a little longer to do it. So that's one pranayam which involves the myofascial exercise. The other one is the twisted tongue or a folded tongue. Okay, you have to do inhalation and then exhale. This also helps your tongue and the oropharyngeal muscle. So it protrudes the tongue. So there's protrusion as well as there's suction and contraction of the oropharyngeal muscles. So these are the few exercises which we do for OSA. I think my time is, how much time did I take? Shall we go for the exercise? Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want, actually madam had kept it up.